Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Art Curators Tour led by Amery Calvelli. My name is Michael Magnuson. I am the new Public Program and Outreach Coordinator at the Art Gallery of Alberta. To start this program, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. The AGA is located in Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton, the traditional land of diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Inuit, and Ojibwe Saulteaux Anishinaabe. We acknowledge and extend gratitude to the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations, and who continue to call this place home today. We are very happy that you have joined us for this virtual tour of the exhibition Cornelia Hahn Oberlander, Genius Loci, led by curator Amery Calvelli, presented by the Poole Center of Design at the Art Gallery of Alberta. Just so you know, we have Amery here, so they're going to be available for a Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A function in Zoom, or if you are watching from Facebook, you can write your questions in the chat. This AGA Live is made possible in part through support from the Heart and Soul Fund by EPCOR. And I would also like to thank the Canada Council for the Arts and the Poole Center of Design. Okay, now I'm going to introduce Amery. Amery Calvelli contributes through her work to improving public's relationships with architecture and design. Since 2018, as adjunct curator of the Poole Center of Design at the Art Gallery of Alberta, she has curated and co-curated exhibitions including Cul-de-sac, From Here, Convening Place, Another Landscape Show, and Nest for the End of the World. So without further delay, I would like to bring out Amery.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to be here tonight. And hello, everyone. I'm Amery Calvelli. I'm the adjunct curator of design at the Poole Center of Design at the Art Gallery of Alberta. And really delighted to share the Cornelia Hahn Oberlander Genius Loci exhibition with you tonight. As Michael mentioned, we're going to start with a video and then we'll have some Q&A afterwards. So I'll catch you on the other side of the video. Thanks very much. Michael, it's all yours. Hello, I'm Amery Calvelli. I'm the adjunct curator at the Poole Center of Design at the Art Gallery of Alberta. I'm here today to say a few words about the Cornelia Hahn Oberlander show, Genius Loci. Genius Loci, just for those that may not know the term, is really describing the spirit of a place. It is thinking more contextually, bringing in emotional connections to a place, really thinking about the experience or the lived experience of a place. Cornelia Hahn Oberlander was born in 1921 in Germany, June of 1921. She nearly made 100 years. She moved to the US in the 40s and went to school both at Smith College and then at the Harvard School of Design, the Harvard Graduate School of Design in landscape architecture. She got a degree and was actually one of the early landscape architecture degrees from a female, as a woman. She then, in the 1950s, started working in community planning in Philadelphia, and then moved in 1953 with her husband, Peter Oberlander, who she met at Harvard, and they moved to Vancouver. And so for the next 60 years, Cornelia's career took place in Canada, in Vancouver. In 2016, she was awarded the inaugural Governor General's Award for Landscape Architecture. And this year, in 2021, an International Landscape Prize will be named in her name, the Cornelia Hahn Oberlander International Prize. The first recipient will be announced this fall, and it will be a biennial prize for a landscape architect, similar to how the Pritzker runs for architecture. This exhibition started It's co-curated by myself and Dr. Hilary Letwin from the West Vancouver Art Museum. The exhibition started in January at the West Vancouver Art Museum and has been installed here in the spring, and we're excited that it's open. And it will run through October 17th. And then we're also really pleased to announce that this show will be traveling both to Winnipeg in the fall and then in January to Toronto. So there'll be some places to see it. I wanted to just briefly read something that Cornelia had received a letter from her grandmother as she was leaving Germany in 1938. And this is something that in Cornelia's, in discussions with her and also in interviews, she had said it really resonated with her and carried some strong resonance throughout her life. And the phrase, the part of the letter says, "You have to bring beauty into everything, and the new forms that you will give the land, and also the people that use it, with your whole heart. Whatever you do in your work will be the seed for the next generation." And really thinking about those next generations is something that Cornelia has been very engaged with. So I'll take you through the show. Now we're in the exhibition. And I think before we go into specific projects, I will say that what one can take away from this show is a sense of generosity of her work. The idea that there isn't an effort of shoehorning design into a particular object of spectacle. It's much more generous in standing and in any of her landscapes. If any of you have done that, which I'm sure you have, there's a real experience or feeling, a sense of rootedness or connection to the earth. And that's something that I think really resounds in her work. The exhibition was divided into 4 sections, and both Hilary and myself curated 2 sections. So I'll walk you through all 4 of them. The first one was around playgrounds and around social housing are the 2 that I curated, and then Hilary curated the public projects and the private residences. I think what was really interesting from my interest was really about Cornelia's ability to connect the human emotional, human spirit to a design and to a place, and really thinking about landscape as something that brings one more connected to their environment and to others. Cornelia actually passed, unfortunately, last month, and before she passed, in April, I had asked her, we had just talked about legacy earlier, and I'd asked Cornelia for some comments on what she might think for students coming forward now. What would the students in architecture and landscape really want to hear? What should they be looking for? And her words were basically, treat every day as Earth Day, and study ecology and biology. So really thinking about the environment in a very different way. And she said, basically, that is my advice. And so as we go forward, I'm sure there are many students that will continue to follow in her footprint, and we'll go through the show. So I wanted to start the playground discussion with a drawing by an anonymous student that talks about playgrounds. And I'm sure you can read it, but in case you can't, I would like an adventure playground because it would probably give me something to do. The reason I say this is because I'm always bored. And I think that this piece in particular starts off this connection that Cornelia had with how children want to engage with their environment and how they want to engage with others. So that social connection as well as the physical playing outdoors type of thing. There are 3 playgrounds in this playground exhibition that we'll be talking about. This first one is 18th and Bigler, and this took place it was her first project actually in 1952. It was a street corner parking space that is turned into a park, a pocket park, and So we'll go through 18th and Bigler. Her next project that we will talk about is the Expo Creative Center in 1967. And then we'll go all the way over to a 2012 project that she had done in the north. So we're really spanning almost 68 years of playground work that she had done. So as Cornelia had been a community planner upon graduating, recently after graduating from Harvard, and it was actually a very interesting planning engagement where it developed a lot of outreach to the community, speaking with communities, interviews, exploring ideas that communities might want. From that work, Cornelia's first solo project was at 18th and Bigler Streets in Philadelphia. And so this is a pocket park that was designed for multiple ages of people in the neighborhoods. And what we can see from these different types of playing, which I think is really interesting, you can see the different ages that she was thinking of. So you've got the ball fields on the right-hand side for older children to be playing. This very circle here, this play area, is a concrete ring that actually is still in existence today, but for young toddlers and young children to sit on and play on. So it's a very low circle. And then as you start moving through, there's more like board games, shuffle games, basketball, volleyball. So all these different types of activities for different age groups and different communities to come together. So that was part of what this playground entailed. We'll also look right over here at the way that children play, and we'll see those connections come together. So one of the things that's quite interesting about Cornelia's way of working with playgrounds is trying to understand what children want to do. And so this is an example of some of the work studies that her office, she had prepared. And there are some really interesting little activities for children listed on here, such as making things, anything, and then help their younger brothers and sisters, but that's actually crossed off because maybe that wasn't as important after all. Painting, planting, sliding and rolling in slides. And I think when we see some of Cornelia's playground works, we really do see some of these activities considered in a really interesting way. So we're standing now in front of the project for the Children's Creative Center for the Canadian Pavilion at the Expo 67. This was really a chance for Cornelia to bring her ideas to an international scale. You can see here the letter from the commissioning governor from the Canadian government. We're requesting her participation in this project. And what I would like to point out here, we started talking about activities just a moment ago. So these drawings are actually showing some of the unique activities that she was exploring at the time. So we've got site and elevation and sketch for rocking, to create a rocking boat inside a stream that was created in the park. And you've got other types of activities. There were mounds to play on, there were things for up and down, building, loose parts. All of those things were very important to the design that she was doing here. One of the things I wanted to bring in terms of context of play and active play and some of the things that were being explored, playground design had gone through a number of different types of changes throughout history. In the 1980s, there started to be a movement towards more safety, creating playground structures that were safe. And in fact, sociologists have talked about the idea of what this effect has had on children in terms of cognitive ability and risk aversion in the future. So I think Cornelia's work, while it was coming through in the 80s, she was still doing this kind of work that was very active and very socially engaged and cognitively engaged, while the market itself was turning towards things that would be more safe, where if a bone was broken, that was a bad thing. And so I think it's really interesting in that context to think about her playgrounds as exploring things that were not trying to standardize or to create the safest environment, but to create a learning environment, an experiential environment. So this plan of the Children's Creative Center actually shows a ability to replicate the design. It's created on a site that's called a pocket park, which is quite small, can fit in any urban environment quite easily. So the idea of experimenting with different types of activities that can be replicated or scaled into different neighborhoods is part of what this plan demonstrates. Following this project, Cornelia Hahn Oberlander went on to author a handbook for playgrounds, which was commissioned by the Government of Canada, and it's called Playgrounds, A Plea for Utopia or the Recycled Urban Lot. And that was published in 1974, I believe. So we're standing here in front of the East 3 School. It's a K through 12 school that was built in the Northwest Territories, about 2 degrees from the Arctic Circle. And it was done in collaboration with Penn Taylor Architects. And what we have here is a plan that describes the layout of the school playgrounds. So kindergarten in the most sheltered area, moving through elementary school, higher ages farther up. Here shows a few of the different types of play materials using logs and wood and things in the area, creating an identity for play. But what I was really interested in here is really talking about her research process. Cornelia had, in one of her files, there was 4 Post-its, and one said, research play, research the Arctic, research climate change, research the environment. Research plants, rather, was the 4th one. And so those 4 things were kind of her area of research for this project. You can see in researching play, what she's done is create a play matrix, which identifies by different age groups. So we've got grade 1 to 3, kindergarten 1 to 3, and then grade 8 to 12. And you've got different types of activities, whether they're spaces for sitting, spaces to distinctly experience something. There's even learning with elders for each of the age groups. So, but you start with stories in the younger age. As you go farther up, there are things like hunting and fishing, food processing. So there are all these activities that are laid out in terms of how they might use the space. I will now move over to this letter. This letter is actually what Cornelia had given to the school when the school opened in 2012. And I'll read one of the phrases here that says, "We hope you will learn more about the different plants from your family and community elders, as well as from your teachers. These are the plants of your own home, which have also provided medicines and food, as well as materials for building and implements for hundreds of years. Now it is your turn to learn all you can about this special resource, so that one day you will be able to teach others." And I think that was about the legacy of carrying on. Food security was something that Cornelia has talked about and has expressed concern with, and so this project actually demonstrates some of that. A lot of berries, and the berry picking is actually one of the activities. And I think there's also an interesting, we'll see this when we go to the Northwest Territories project as well. Cornelia, because being so far north, it was very difficult actually to promulgate the native landscape. And so she ended up taking the seeds, collecting seeds, taking them to Vancouver, germinating them for 2 years, and then bringing them back to plant them, and basically inserting them inside the existing native plants. It's called invisible mending, and so that's something that she did. And also these trees that had been moved were moved by root pruning the first year, so that they could become a little bit stronger before being transplanted. So there were a lot of things in thinking about how to work in the north and in a different way. So we're in the section of social housing now, and for those that may not know what social housing or public housing is, that's often government-supported or nonprofit housing. And Cornelia has always had a strong interest in working with social projects. We're standing in front of Schoolkill Falls, which is one of her earlier projects. It was done in 1955, and Cornelia had been selected by architect Oscar Stonerov to work on this project with Dan Kiley. And what it is a large residential development. One of the things that's quite interesting about this project is that they were starting to develop specifications, and Cornelia started thinking about maintenance specifications, how to trim or retain trees so that they would last for a longer time and to keep them in their best state for lasting longer. There's a note up here that was part of the project as well that really talks about engaging with community and what work still is left to be done. And then I think also her look at how tree spacing and where tree typology that would allow certain trees in certain areas and give access to light and to green space for all residents. At the same time, she was working on Mill Creek, which is on the other side here. And this was a project by Louis Kahn, so she was working with Dan Kiley on both projects simultaneously. So we're standing now in front of the Portland Hotel, which was done in collaboration with Arthur Erickson and Nick Milikovich in 2008. This is a project that was designed for Hastings Street in Vancouver for people that are struggling with mental and substance addiction. What is quite interesting about this project, from my view, is that Cornelia, generally when doing industrial types of gardens, one might put in strong, sturdy, foolproof types of materials or plants that will be indestructible. And instead, Cornelia decided she wanted to create this like a backyard. So to create more of a residential experience for the residents. And so she's got apple trees, she's thinking about blueberries, strawberries, wooden benches instead of steel benches, all these things that would make it feel a little bit more like a backyard. So we're standing in front of the Northwest Territories building, the Legislative Assembly in the Northwest Territories building. It was completed in 1995. It was done in collaboration, Cornelia's work was done in collaboration with Matsuzaki, Pinn, Williams, Matthew, architects. This is a project that, similar to the other school that we talked about, the East 3 school that used invisible mending, this project as well was actually the precursor to the school in terms of invisible mending, taking planting seeds, bringing them to Vancouver, and then planting them 2 years later in the site. The idea is to use the natural landscape to look as natural as possible. If maybe someone came by and said, I don't see the design that the landscape architect did, I think that's the point. And this does demonstrate it. This image is actually a photograph by Etta Gerdes. It was done in 2005. So there are 3 drawings here for the Northwest Territories building. We're going to look closely at this linkages to the Legislative Assembly building, which is showing the different path of experiences. And I really love how these are laid out, where there's rocks, nodes for information. There's a ceremonial area. Over here, there's the lake, and then the municipal plaza, and the paths itself. So really exploring the experience of how one might encounter the assembly building and the landscaping around it. So the Taiga Garden is a project that Cornelia collaborated with Moshe Safdie architects on. It's at the National Gallery in Ottawa. It was completed in 1988. And what we're seeing here is in the presentation plan, but also in the site of the particular plantings specifications themselves, is Cornelia had defined the design of this project around the Terre Sauvage and two artists, A.Y. Jackson's paintings in particular. And so the particular shape in the paintings of the coniferous trees in general is something that she wanted to emulate in the garden. And so you can see the identification of the different plantings, and then also I think when there were stories that when she went to the nursery to get these plantings, she was scrambling to get the least attractive plants because they were the ones that would have this character that she wanted. And the nursery was kind of like, "Are you sure you want that one?" But that was something that was part of this. But this is the Tiger Garden. There's an interesting connection with Rooftop Gardens. I think Cornelia's first rooftop garden is in Vancouver. It's the Robson Square complex, and it was completed in 1978, working with Arthur Erickson. And just the knowledge of 40 years of rooftop garden design and the types of planting materials and the technology required to make them successful is something that she had deep passion for and also had built quite a knowledge base. When we think about the idea of rewilding a city or bringing the wilderness back into the city, Rooftop Gardens is one of those prime opportunities to do so. And so these are nice examples. So we're standing in front of Monteverdi Estates. This is one of the projects in the private residences category. And it's a 20-unit complex on a very steep ravine in Vancouver. It was a collaboration with Arthur Erickson Architects and Cornelia, and it was done in 1982. One of the things that's quite interesting about this project is how the attention to not only the plantings and what those plantings would be, but thinking about 40 years from now, how would they be maintained? And maintenance was a very strong expression in the things that were selected for this show. So there's one memorandum that I just love and I might read to you. It says, after an application of fertilizer, crushed dry moss should be sprinkled over the roof areas in order to encourage the greening of the roofs. So that's one maintenance tip. And there's another one here that's much longer, and I won't read it, but it's really talking, it's a note to Eva Matsutsuki from Cornelia Hahn Oberlander, really talking about the kinds of things that need to happen in order to keep the native landscape looking as native as possible. And so that lasting duration, 40 years on, it's still intact and in very good condition. So that's a testament. And when we think about the earliest maintenance schedules that she started with Schoolkill Falls, it's something that maintenance has been a very strong interest. Not only do you plant something and let it grow, but how does it maintain and stay? This final piece in the exhibition is a film by Cornelia's daughter, Wendy Oberlander. It was completed in 2001. The film content has archival footage, and it also has a narration by Wendy, and it has composed music. What this is about is Wendy going back with her mother 60 years after leaving Berlin in 1938 when Kristallnacht happened. As I mentioned earlier, when Cornelia had been given her letter from her grandmother, she had escaped Germany, and this was her first time back together. And so it's an exploration of that experience and moving forward in a different direction from the past. And there's some beautiful phrases of Cornelia's. It shows a very personal and wonderful relationship that they have between the two. So thank you for joining this tour with me today. And I do hope that you will have the chance to visit the exhibition. The Cornelia Hahn Oberlander Genius Loci is open until October 17th at the Art Gallery of Alberta. It will go on to travel, but we encourage you to come to the Art Gallery first. So thank you for joining me, and have a good day.
Well, thank you so much, Amery, for that lovely tour. That was really excellent. So now is everyone's opportunity to ask the question of Amery. So if you would like to ask the question, if you are visiting on Facebook, you can write in the chat, or if you are on Zoom, you can just write in the Q&A function. And I am going to be moderating the Facebook, so you'll see me look at my phone, but I am paying attention. Okay, great. I'm just going to check the comments here. And okay, so I have a question to start off for you. I'm very curious just about how this exhibition started, and also like what was your inspiration for choosing to do an exhibition about Cornelia as a curator?
It's a nice question. Thank you, Michael. I think that I've been an admirer, as many people have and many Canadians have, of Cornelia's work for a long time. I think she really has been breaking the ground in so many ways for landscape architecture. I think one of the questions that I often get is, why is landscape architecture in a museum? And I think landscape architecture as a practice is something that's really helping to reveal a different way of architecture. It's less about the buildings and really thinking about the environment, thinking about the culture, the social interactions that happen on the street. All of those things that happen within and around a building is equally important in architecture. And so I think landscape architecture as a practice is very important. And so bringing that forward, I think, is something that felt important to do, but also just being a huge admirer of her work for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. She has such a huge influence, and also it was proved to be so important, landscape architecture in parks, especially during the pandemic. Like, you know, everyone needed to find some calm, and often that was through going outside. So I have another question. So this is a little bit of a leap, but I'm just curious about all the projects that Cornelia has done. And what are some that you find that are still, like, they're all very relevant, but what are some that are extremely relevant in 2021?
Well, I have to mention a playground because I think that's something that's really important. And I think if we think about some of the early playgrounds, like the 18th and Bigler Street, the fact that it's still intact and it's not being occupied or used in the same way that it was, it's evolved, and maybe it'll come back in a different reiteration, but it's still intact. And I think that's something that is important. I think a lot of her public projects, working with the Vancouver Public Library, the National Gallery, those projects are very strong. I think there were some projects that we didn't include in the exhibition that were also strong, and I'd say the C.K. Choi building is really groundbreaking for the way that it really used water sustainably. So it recycles in a way that was quite forward at the time, and it's still quite relevant. If you think about her what is the Robson Square project that was done in the 70s with Arthur Erickson. That project was very instrumental in really thinking about roof gardens. And we've seen in architecture and design, roof design, rooftop landscaping becoming much more relevant as people start to think about addressing climate change. And these were early projects. So there are lessons in some of these projects still.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's so many lessons, and especially when you see the exhibition, it's so nice to pick up on different things that maybe as like a person just living their life can incorporate into their garden, or maybe like thinking about like playgrounds in their own backyard. So I think there's so many lessons. I have a question here from Helen. Helen C. How did Cornelia get captivated by playgrounds? And then the second part, and how did her thought process with playground influence the progression of her work?
I think that there's probably a number of ways to answer this, but I'll answer it the best I can as far as how she got interested in playgrounds. And I think she was doing a lot of early community planning work and in working with communities on surveying access to certain things and understanding how communities connected to their environment, what kind of public spaces were available and that sort of thing. And so I think some of that actually informed her way of connecting with the public. There's one story that was an anecdote that she'd given in an interview that talks about she was interviewing a drugstore owner that had a parking lot next to his drugstore. And he said, well, someday the city is going to make this a park. And she said, but you need a park now. And so she started drawing the park. And so I think, I mean, not right there, but I mean, it became a park because she saw the need for it right away. And so I think that, I don't know if that's the only way that she was connected to designing parks and playgrounds, but I know she also was very passionate about, she had 3 children. And so she was doing research. Sometimes the kids would come along when she was checking out on public parks and things. So I think a connection with learning, connection with children, and also just her background work before moving to Vancouver as a community planner were probably the instrumental forces.
Yeah, it's interesting how kids are really good with your research. If you have kids, it's really good. And it was something that I noticed just with their research when they were in the Northwest Territories. They also consulted with children's, which is really great. And one of the things I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit more about that project. You briefly talked about invisible mending. Can you explain what that is and how Cornelia used it a little bit more?
Yeah, so, and this invisible mending was actually initiated with the Northwest Territories Legislative Building, which was a few years earlier than the school. But the idea was really placing the native landscape back. And so if you find spaces where a bog has been altered or damaged in some way, bringing the native species back and just planting little ones back that become the natural landscape. There was one interview I'd heard from when I was doing research, and I won't be able to tell you which one it was because I don't remember, but I remember the person walking by the garden in the Northwest Territories was talking about how they didn't know what had been done. They didn't see the design. And that is the purpose of an invisible mending, is if you can actually bring it to its natural state so that it looks like we haven't touched it in a way.
Okay, yeah, that's really fabulous. I'm just going to encourage people to write their questions in the chat. So if you have any questions, Amery's here to answer them. Can you tell me a little bit, one thing in the show is we didn't really touch on was the video. Can you talk to me a little bit about the video? It seems like there's obviously lovely drawings and amazing photographs, but there's also a really special video included in the exhibition.
Yes, so the video was done, and I think we did show a little tiny bit of it in the last part, but we really didn't talk about it. So Cornelia's daughter, Wendy Oberlander, is the creator of the video, and she and her mother went back to Germany 60 years after Cornelia had left Germany due to the times with Crystal Nod. And so they went back, and it was a reunification of place, coming together again to find this place. And it kind of intersperses archival footage, which is very blurry and very rustic, if you will, with some voice overlay of Wendy and also Cornelia's words. And so it's really, I mean, what I liked about it was that it took an idea of landscape, because, reconnecting with the place and land again, it brings a kind of different layer to landscape. It's no longer just a flat terrain, but it's really starting to bring the memories and the experiences of a place layering on top of that landscape. So that's kind of what I thought was quite interesting about the video. It's beautifully done, and it's let's see if I can say anything else about it. But I don't know. Is there anything else you want? I mean, there was
that's great.
There's music. There's a bass clarinet.
Yeah, definitely.
I want that. Yeah.
No, it's good. I've been in this space recently, and it's really nice to kind of sit by yourself and watch the video. It's really immersive. So I encourage everyone to check out the exhibition, which is currently on display. Or maybe it's traveling to your local, like to if you're in Winnipeg or if you're in Toronto. So that's really great. I have a couple more questions, but I'm just going to check the chat to see if anyone else has a questions. I've been talking a lot. Is there anything that you kind of want to say that maybe you missed in your presentation or you want to elaborate on?
I think, I mean, I felt like it was, I probably went very heavy on the play and the social because those were the two areas that I curated. I think there's a lot of depth in the public projects and also in the private residences. And so I think just having the opportunity to really be in the space and see the drawings and see the color and the use of exploration of what kinds of plants should be planted in certain places and why, and some of the thought processes behind these designs, you really get that just standing in front of a lot of these drawings and illustrations.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have another question here, and it's about the survival of the landscape. So how did Cornelia's landscape survive? She was concerned with maintenance. Did it work? Did the plants she started in Vancouver survive after being planted elsewhere?
There's a video that we screened earlier, City Dreamers, and in that video, Cornelia is talking about the Robson Square and how it was planted differently than how she had, some of it was planted differently. So I think I'm sure there's always challenges where it's never going to be exactly as you wish, but I think that I would say from my purview, there are a lot of projects that have had some good lasting stay, and I think the housing project that we showed, Monteverdi Estates, was a nice example of something where the landscape has maintained itself. In a lot of ways, it's still, you can go to it 40 years later and still get the intent or the feeling of what that project is about. So I don't know if that helps. I think maybe the idea of whether it's lasting or not was less important than the fact that it was connecting humans to their environment and creating. I talked about rewilding a little bit near the end of that video, and I think that was a concept that was Cornelia was quite interested in, this idea that let's bring more planted life, more nature into our urban environments.
Yeah. Definitely. And there's the funny scene where Cornelia in that video, she's talking to a city worker and he's assessing the park. And she's like, I'm the landscape architect. This doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
Which I thought was amazing that they're so involved in what they design and what they create. I have another question from Marianne. Where are most of her records housed?
The CCA, the Canadian Centre for Architecture, has the collection of Cornelia's work. It's a large, massive body of work, and they've archived it all. And it's all there. There might be other pieces elsewhere, but that's what the large body of work is.
Yeah, great. Well, that's fabulous. I think we have time for one more question. If any questions are super pressing, we'll just give it a little moment. I'm also going to check Facebook. So if you are on Facebook, please feel free to write a question. So we'll just give it a moment. I have asked all my questions. So we'll just see if anything is happening in the chat. I guess maybe since we mentioned the CCA, can we talk a little bit about research, like both Cornelia's research, because it seemed like that was such an important part of their practice, but also your research. Where did your research start?
Well, I was at the CCA researching the archives and reading. I guess I would say my research started by visiting some of Cornelia's work and feeling the experience of being in the spaces and feeling that it was different. But then there's a wonderful book that Susan Harrington wrote about Cornelia's body of work. And so that is another wonderful resource, and I can share the link to that. But I would say the CCA and the research there. And I would also say that in going through a lot of the records, that Cornelia was a deep researcher. Like there were boxes of archives of articles, you know, like the New Yorker on climate, an article about climate change from the New Yorker, or there'd be, you know, local treasures from the places. If she was working in the North, in the Arctic, you know, certain local publications, or stories about someone that had recovered something. So that, you know, it wasn't related necessarily just to plants or to square footage or space, but it was really more experiential kind of research. So it's really nice to see that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and also just speaking of, you talked a little bit about books. There's also a catalog for this exhibition, which you can purchase if you would like. It's in our shops. It's really this beautiful catalog, this bright orange catalog. So if you're wanting to learn more and doing your own research, that's a good source. I see that there's no more questions in the chat, so maybe we'll just end it there. Amery, do you have any last parting words for us?
No, I would just say it's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to curate this show and co-curate it with Hilary Letwin. It was a remarkable journey going through the pandemic. It was originally slated to be installed much earlier, and then we waited because of the pandemic, but it's really nice to see it up. And I hope that you're able to visit the AGA while it's up through October 17th and see the works in person, because there's nothing like being in person in front of some of these drawings to really see things and experience it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity, Michael.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking with me, and thank you for the tour. And I'm also going to say thank you to everyone that attended, and also Helen, who is behind the Zoom doing some technical stuff and helped with the video. So thank you to everyone. And I will say goodnight. I hope everyone has a really nice evening. It was so nice that you all joined us. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.